Hello and welcome to another episode of the Strettycast. My name is Dale O'Donnell, your host, and I'm speaking just hours after Manchester United's 4-0 win against Liverpool in what was a pre-season friendly. Now, if low points from Solskjaer and Rangnick's reigns come from the harrowing defeats against Liverpool of last season, losing not just 5-0 but 4-0 as well at Anfield, this at least shows that Ten Hag is starting on a brighter note, and I may be clutching at straws because there's not really too much you can take away from these pre-season games. I suspect that what we're seeing today, which was very, very positive, that we could easily see some inconsistency there in performances, because these players are not at the level that we expect them to be when the competitive games come. So it'll take them all a while to fit into Ten Hag's plans. It's not going to be plain sailing in the sense that what we've seen today was fantastic and it's just going to go from here to the top. There'll be some bumps along the way, there's no doubt about that. So Manchester United won 4-0, goals scored by Jadon Sancho, Fred, Anthony Martial and Facundo Pellistri. Now, some of the kind of takes that we took from the game on StrettyNews.com kind of originated from Ten Hag's tactics and his approach to playing against Liverpool. Now, Jurgen Klopp has kind of had sly digs in the past about the way United have approached these games in the past, saying kind of since he's arrived in Liverpool that Manchester United have never attacked him. Now, I'm sure you could go back and look at some of those games and see where we hit them on counter-attacks and so on, but I get his point, and I suspect that with Ten Hag that will drastically change. And I think we've seen a bit of that in the first game on pre-season, that Manchester United played with a high press. Their full-backs were pressed high up the pitch and they weren't being pinned back like they usually would be against Liverpool in a competitive game or pre-season. As well as that, the players that were assigned to roles in centre defensive midfield, in that department, they were kind of dropping in when the centre backs were, say, pushing forward, and that was something a lot of people on Twitter picked up on, was the centre backs and how adventurous they were, and aggressive in going into that kind of final third almost with Erik Bailly's case, but we'll get to that shortly. But the tactics, it was clear to see that the players knew what they had to do. That was an immediate improvement on what we seen last season under Rangnick, because throughout his duration, I think you could only say for 45 minutes or even less than that at Crystal Palace, that the players they showed signs that they were going to buy into what Rangnick was doing, and that was short-lived. Like I said, only the first half. The second half, the players then quickly trying to towel it and said, "No, Ralph, we're not doing this." That wasn't the case today. The manager has a right to be more assured, because he is the long-term manager. He hasn't got those problems that Ten Hag had, or teething problems that German might describe them. But there were definitely encouraging signs that, like I said, the players know what they had to do. It's drastically different to before, where United would sit back. We're not going to see that in games, and there's definitely going to be a lot of risks taken in games. When I mentioned the centre backs being adventurous, in theory that might really excite people and think this is great. In the Premier League, I'd imagine that's going to be a little bit problematic at times for Manchester United, and Ten Hag might be able to weigh out that it's better for us than it is bad. There might be a few problems, but in the long run it might be better for us, and we'll see over time. But you don't want your centre backs being pulled apart, especially in big games. And if our centre backs are passing the ball and looking for the next pass and running into the opposition's half, they could be easily pulled apart by some of the better teams. So that's just something to watch out for. It wasn't a problem today. Like I said, Liverpool, like Manchester United, when it comes to fitness levels, they weren't quite at their peak. They were miles off it. Jurgen Klopp has been speaking after the match, kind of saying that the game came too soon for him playing Manchester United, and they're more used to kind of lesser profile games when they're starting their pre-season tour. But as I wrote on the blog, which you can find on StrettyNews.com, you don't get games bigger than this. So and it's very rare that Manchester United take on Liverpool in a pre-season friendly. It last happened in 2018. Like I said in the in the podcast earlier this week in front of 100,000 fans in Michigan. So that was a record-breaking attendance, by the way. So yeah, this is rare, and it was just basically Klopp coming out with excuses, which I thought was quite pathetic because this is a pre-season game. I'm not on here gloating about beating Liverpool in a game that means nothing. And as for the trophy that was dished out after the match for the Bangkok Century Cup, it was the most pre-season looking trophy that you would ever see. I think it even had a button that made the lights light up. It was like a cake at a stadium built around this trophy. But yeah, some of those trophies do make their way back to the museum at Old Trafford and become like mantelpiece kind of furniture, which is interesting. Yeah, and why not? You know, it's part of the club's history that they're travelling to these fantastic stadiums across the world, and if they can take a little bit of something back and show it off for many years to come, we're not saying that it's a trophy that we're going to celebrate by any means, but it's just something, token gesture, and nice for Ten Hag to get off to that winning start against Liverpool and to see what it means to fans across the world, as well as that, of course. Going back into the game, some of the highlights which I'll touch on in this short podcast. Darwin Núñez came on in the second half, and he looked a bit more like Andy Carroll than a Uruguayan king. If you ask me, he missed an absolute sitter near the end of the game in an open net and just looked like more of a clearance than a shot on goal, to be honest. Charlie Savage and Sedan Iqbal held their own in midfield when they came on in the second half. Obviously, if you watch the game, you would have noticed that in the first half, Manchester United played with a much faster tempo, created a lot more chances. They did give away chances, but the point was that it wasn't just a stage of domination for Liverpool where they got their own way the whole time, which we seen last season. Manchester United held their own, but in that second half, when Ten Hag made some changes, he brought on some young players and got them the opportunity to get some minutes under their belt. I thought it was really encouraging to see Savage and Sedan in that midfield kind of pivot role that we've seen from Fred and McTominay in the first half. Now, arguably, the two younger lads I thought did a better job. Sedan, for me, was the best midfielder we had today. He had Fabinho in his pocket at times in the second half. Now, that said, in the second half, United weren't as good. They weren't as good in possession. They weren't as sipier with their passing. And another player that came into the fold in the second half was Donny van de Beek, and he was pretty quiet. So he didn't really stand out. But this is Donny and Erik Ten Hag. You look at the pictures around social media, he's smiling at Carrington and he feels like he's in his comfort zone again. So I don't think he'll be sweating too much about not pulling up trees today, and because he will get more opportunities to prove himself. Also, Anthony Martial looked a lot leaner. His pressing resulted in a goal in the first half, and he led the line really, really well. Now, he's going to offer Ten Hag something different to Ronaldo, which I think a lot of United fans, including myself, in the past few months haven't been thinking about. It was mostly my thought process for the past while has been he didn't work out at Seville. It was a failure for him. Why on earth would we be taking him back to Manchester United? And I think that's a valid argument, because Martial has been around for a very long time. He's had countless opportunities, and he's not shaped into that prolific goal scorer that Manchester United need to be at the level that we're expecting in the coming years with Ten Hag. Now, that said, this might seem like gobbledygook to some people, but in theory, maybe. Anthony Martial is 26, and if you go back and you look at another Frenchman at that age, Erik Cantona, and his career path before he ended up at Old Trafford, there was lots of bumps along the way. And with a kind of wishing previously that Martial would be sold this summer, he's a player that's gone down a similar path, and he has to go now and prove himself. And I think there's no reason why he can't do that at Manchester United. I'm not saying go give him another chance just like that off the back of one game, but from watching him today, I thought he did a lot of things that were very encouraging. He pressed extremely well. One of the best players I thought United had in that pressing department. And Ten Hag can work with that. It gives him something else apart from Ronaldo. And it might give him another chance moving forward. You must not forget either, before Ronaldo came back and we finished second in the league under Solskjaer, Martial wasn't too far off leading that forward line. And Rashford too was in better form. And he was scoring the goals. And there's no reason why that we can't get back to that. Now, when it comes to Rashford today, I thought he looked bright, but he didn't look confident, and he needs that goal. He missed a good chance in the first half. It was a shame, but look, I think with him, hopefully he can get some goals in this pre-season tour and just get out of this confidence kind of shackle he's in. But he did look bright and he looked in good shape, so that's at least positive on that front. But with Eric Bailly, one of the final points I wanted to make, because one of the standout goals for me was Pellistри's, the fourth goal United scored against Liverpool. And it started with one of those movements that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, where the centre-back would release the ball and go on an adventurous run into the opponent's half. And with Erik Bailly, we know with him he's pure box office, but it was just, I think he nearly epitomises this kind of role that we could see from our defenders this season, because he's pure flip of a coin. He's back to his crazy self, legitimately a mental player. And you can't say he doesn't offer box office entertainment, but I think really when it comes to it, we can't change our opinion too much on these players because of pre-season games. And Manchester United need to get back to being ruthless. Need to get back to being ruthless. Now, in that phase of play I was talking about, he stepped out of the fence and he ends up in Liverpool's box after a wild run. But ultimately, and we laugh at these things, we laugh about when they go well. Let's not forget, there's been games when Erik Bailly's done some crazy things that have resulted in goals. And at that moment in time, a lot of us deem it unforgivable. He's a joke. But it's funny how it changes, like him, a flip of a coin. But I would like to see less of this kind of sentimental bullshit around Manchester United. I think we are seeing a bit of that this summer. I just hope that with some of these players, that even if they have a good pre-season tour, it doesn't mean that they get another chance. I've already said that I think Martial should be an exception to that. It's basically down to the lack of options we have in that striking department. So he's lucky. But when it comes to Erik Bailly, I think he should be, for his own sake even, pushing for a move somewhere where he's going to get regular football, because he's been complaining about it for the past 5 months or something, being frozen out by Ragnick. Another point was David De Gea's performance. Now, unfortunately for De Gea, he did suffer an injury in the second half, and he was one of the few players that was kept on. Ten Hag never revealed whether his plans were for De Gea to play 90 minutes or not today. Really encouraging again to see De Gea come off his line. His injury actually resulted in one of his attempts to come off his line to win the ball back, which was successful, but he quickly signalled to the bench that he had to come off. And there was no talk after the game of an injury update from Ten Hag. We might see it in the newspapers tomorrow morning. Subscribe to the Stretty newsletter as well for updates, but you can get all the latest news on strettynews.com. With Ten Hag as manager, we've spoken around the blog that there's going to be greater expectations for David De Gea. He's going to have to come off his line. He's going to be expected to play with the ball at his feet and bring the defenders into play and bring, hopefully, Frenkie de Jong into play too. But this performance was definitely something to build on. It was better than what I expected. I thought going into this season that we would have a repeat of the Joe Hart situation with Pep Guardiola and Man City, but today it wasn't as bad as first feared. When he came off his line to win the ball, he was doing it at the right moments, and even some of the journalists on Twitter were commenting about it because they were shocked to see it. Now, we knew that Ten Hag was going to have asked this of De Gea, and the reason why I guess people are shocked is Spain manager Luis Enrique has been extremely outspoken about De Gea and why he doesn't get into the Spain squad, because he's not seen as a modern goalkeeper who carries out these duties. Now, I'd imagine surely Enrique, from working with De Gea previously, has at least asked him or requested him to do these things. Now, whether he at the time refused to do it or not, I don't know. But you would think that maybe with these performances that he might be able to work his way back into that Spain squad, because he's going to be United's first choice this season. And it definitely lessens some of the doubts that I have, which I still have because it's only one game, that next season we could be in the market for a new goalkeeper. So that's it for this podcast. It is just a quick match review. I wanted to go through some of the points from the game, and I hope you enjoyed the one we did this week already with Sean. To support the Strettycast, we need you to sign up to the newsletter, because that's where we're going to have our base of other subscribers and sending out our latest shows and our latest snippets and columns and editorials and so on. Our first game, the pre-season tour, definitely went to plan. We got more than what we expected. We got a 4-0 win over Liverpool, which is always a pleasure to watch. But with the performance, it was encouraging. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the lads can offer again next time out in 3 days' time against Melbourne Victory, who interestingly this week announced the signing of former Manchester United winger Nani. So we look forward to that, and we don't know Nani be in the squad to take on United, but we will see in due course. Again, make sure to stay updated with the latest United news at strettynews.com.